Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 8th of April 2015. And joining me on this edition are assistant editor Steve Withers.
I'm not negative, I'm just positive we're going to mess this up.
I felt that, Steve, I really did. That was superb acting. News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
You only live once. Let's do this. Real conviction there.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
I'll buy you a lifetime supply of antidepressants.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. We've just had Easter weekend. What did you guys get up to? Anything exciting? Ed, I noticed you were at a Little Chef.
Yeah. Well, that was on the way back from seeing my parents. And do you know what? Actually, I meant what I said. They served some awesome chips.
Is this Heston Blumenthal, Miss Little Chef? Or?
No, it doesn't seem to be. This is an old pattern one. Just had a real chip enthusiast in the kitchen. And then yesterday...
And one in front of the kitchen too, by the sounds of it.
Yesterday, unbridled excitement of taking my son to the Thomas the Tank Engine experience at the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre. Lots of very excited children there. Perhaps far too many very excited children there. But no, it was all perfectly pleasant. It was, I don't know about you guys, it's the first bank holiday, Easter bank holiday I can remember in years where I didn't need scuba gear to enjoy it. It was, most unusually sunny and pleasant.
Yes, got to say the light was absolutely fantastic on Sunday up in Scotland, and glad I had the camera with me because it was absolutely stunning.
I spent yesterday in the High Peaks on my cousin's farm, which was a proper working farm with 1,000 sheep.
Was that lambing?
Lambing, yeah, lambing. They're hill farmers, so they do it a bit later, but there were a few lambs knocking about. In fact, there'll be an awful lot when they are properly lambing because they've got 1,000 breeding sheep. So, yeah, it was spectacular up there, absolutely gorgeous. Wish I took the camera, really, but I forgot.
Yeah, but you'll have taken a lamb home to have for you.
We'll get one in October.
All right, okay.
One for
October.
the freezer.
All right, okay. Steve?
A whole lamb. Not much, really. I spent most of it watching... I've been ill all weekend, so I spent a lot of it watching Game of Thrones. Season 4 on Blu-ray, projected, which looked great. Ready for Season 5, which kicks off on Monday, Monday. And yesterday, when the weather was nice, went to pub garden for a bit of lunch, which was quite nice. Sat in the garden a bit, which was quite pleasant. Watched the cat camper around and... And learn to hunt bees mainly so far. She seems to be working her way up from in spiders and woodlice. I've been hunted to death.
The best my cat can manage is a leaf. It's the best thing it's ever caught.
I used to have a male cat, and he used to bring birds and mice and all sorts of gifts in, which was nice.
Yeah, it's when they don't kill them, actually, that's actually more of a problem. And you end up with a live, normally slightly panicky animal loose in your house. That's always great fun.
I had to slaughter a thrush on that basis. I had 2 kids and my wife, who's got a phobia of birds, screaming upstairs in the bedroom, and I just couldn't coax it out, so I had to hit it with something. I take no pride in it.
You wish you hadn't asked now, don't you, Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah, let's move on, and let's see what we can win this month. Who am I going to pick? Let's go, Steve.
Right, well, actually, it's pretty much the same as last week, I think, except for one addition. So we've got The Necessary Death of Charlie Countryman on Blu-ray. We've got 3 copies of that available. Not a bad movie. I reviewed it, quite enjoyed it. A bit derivative, but very good picture and sound. So if you're into your AV, that could be a good win. 3 copies of that. The competition ends on the 13th of April, so you've still got a bit of time for that one, another week to go. The Sound Magic P30S headphones, 2 pairs of those available, which Ed reviewed, so they're superb for the money. And that competition runs until the 20th of April. There's the Coen Brothers Blu-ray box set. Not necessarily a lot of classic Coen in there, but some interesting movies nonetheless, things like The Big Lebowski and Tolerable Cruelty. And that's around going until 26th of April, so plenty of time on that one yet. And then there's Paddington Blu-ray, which I reviewed, I think it was last week. I really, really enjoyed. Great movie, great picture and sound, really good Blu-ray set. Great prize, actually. If you win that one, I think you'll be chuffed. Not just you, but the kids, obviously, as well, if you've got them. 30th of April, that one runs till, so you've got a bit of time there. And on the same day, 30th of April, the competition ends for the Dali Cubic 1 stereo system, which is also apparently very good.
Right, let's move on. Let's go to some hardware news. And Sony, who are popular on the forums for their TV lineup, their new 2015 lineup pricing and availability has been announced. Mark?
Well, most of it has. I noticed on reviewing this for the podcast that they haven't actually released the details of the S9 range, which is the curved stuff. But it's some pretty headline-grabbing prices, so you can pick up the what will be the top of the range when released in May. at the time X85C, starting at 1800 for the 55-inch, 65-inch 2700, and the 75-inch £4,500, which, if you think back a couple of years ago, that's quite spectacular pricing. You can even get a 75-inch full HD from the W85 range, which is their top of the range full HD. You can get the 75-inch for £2,500.
That is ridiculous.
I know. Yeah, that was the price that really made me think, oh my God. And this is obviously, they're not a budget manufacturer, and these are good-looking TVs, very highly spec'd, and 75 inches for £2,500.
But then it's 75 inches to cover with light uniformity.
Yeah, these full array backlights or edge lit, I can't remember.
They didn't detail that in this release.
Yeah, you see, it sounds a lot like, great pricing, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking that, but you've got to ask questions, are they 10-bit panels, what's the colour space, is it HDR capable? I think the answer to a lot of the questions is no.
Well, this is the full HD one we're talking about. So
No 4K in there at all.
No, the 4K one was £4,500, which wasn't quite startling. But
that's still quite cheap for a TV that size, though, isn't it?
And then we've just got the W8 series, which start at £800 for the 43-inch and go up to £1,000, which is a bit more routine, to be quite honest. And these will launch in May, and hopefully the Android TV platform will be ready then. And YouView. Probably not. I know.
Well, not what Philips was saying. It doesn't sound like it will be, but
no. So maybe they'll be releasing it without, which would be, I don't know, perhaps a bit of a risk. And YouViews to follow some indeterminate time in the summer. So they've probably got a bit of a job on their hands marrying these two smart platforms together. So yeah, we should start seeing these in May.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. So that's a Sony lineup with some prices just announced and availability. All looks good. 75 inches. It'll be interesting to see the backlight before making anything on that. We're getting this in for review, Steve, or not?
I could probably fit it in if they want to send around a 75-inch TV, but I think we're more likely to get some of the more realistic screen sizes first, I suspect, I hope. But I can take up to 85 inches, no problem. I have done that. Out of context, that could sound very strange.
And positively alarming.
And uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We're at home. We want to watch Netflix or any other streaming service. But we're having problems because we want to watch it in the bedroom, and we've only got the router only goes as far as the living room. So Ed, give me a solution.
You have two, really, and there are pros and cons to both. And now I need to stress this is in my opinion, and they're depending on how you do this and what sort of property you live in, you may find that your hand is forced in either direction. You can either look at a more potent main router to boost the potency of your wireless signal and also improve the bandwidth and the number of streams that can be handled at any one time, so on and so forth. This is the approach that I have done, at least until recently. For long and complicated reasons, I'm actually back on my Sky router at the moment. Essentially, I was having some issues getting a stable high-res audio signal all the way upstairs, so I chopped in the old router and I went for a Netgear R9000. I'm not going to lie, I went for it mainly because I've set up Netgear routers in the past, and the R9000 actually looks pretty cool. I mean, that probably isn't how you should select a router, but it actually looks like it's made out of stealth bomber spares, which is pretty, always going for a laugh. I found that with that in place, I live in a 3-bedroom terrace house. It's nothing particularly enormous, but I have total and complete coverage from upstairs, all rooms, and actually well into the garden. And that's perfectly capable of doing 2 Netflix streams at once, or Netflix and audio from NAS to streamer, so on and so forth. Now, if you live in an older property, or you live in a very large property, you may be better off looking at the Ethernet over mains devices that we review on a semi-regular basis as part of the hardware items. There are a number of brands that produce them, and these use your home wiring to send internet signals to different corners of the house. There are some limitations to them. I have found in my other life as a technical support, I found that some of them have a tendency to bugger up IP addresses a bit, so control apps can occasionally go AWOL when using them. Then on a more esoteric level, if you are keen on your audio, introducing a huge amount of sort of network information into the mains, it's all additional noise. It does affect some bits of audio electronics. and especially if you're a lunatic and you're into turntables, phono stages, etc., where you've got.
Oh, I wonder who that would be.
Well, we are out there in small but worrying numbers. That you do, it is the case where items like that can degrade audio performance, but this is a slightly specialised item. Unless you live in a really big house, or you live in a house which is sort of listed several hundred years old, and you end up with really thick walls and other challenges. Honestly, you'd be amazed at the performance you can get out of a high spec router running wirelessly these days, especially if you take some care to set it up. Have a look and see if you can find some free channel space with regards to the networks around you, and more often than not, you can stream. I don't do any 4K streaming at the moment. There is that as a caveat, but nothing in terms of high def from any of the subscription services, Sky Go or anything like that, has proved to be a challenge. And as I say, I can easily stream lossless and high-res audio at the same time and still have an argument with someone in the general chat forum. So from about 150 quid and up, all of the usual router suspects are producing really, really top-notch products which are well and truly capable of supporting a house's worth of requirements. That would be where I'd start looking, but in other more specialised contexts, Ethernet over mains might be the way to go.
Well, it's the way I had to go because I live in a 150-year-old... Well, it used to be a townhouse which has been developed and chopped, so it's like shops downstairs, and I have the whole of the upstairs area. But apart from 2 false walls to partition off, the rest of the walls are 12 inches thick. So the router in the living room wasn't reaching the cinema room or the bedroom at the back of the house, so I've had to go. Took me 5 minutes to set it up. I was amazed at how easy it was, basically. I'm looking at the plug I bought, the BT ones that I bought, BT 500s. I think I paid 50 quid. And I haven't had any issues with them whatsoever. And like I say, 5 minutes to set up. Bingo.
Well, can't argue with that.
Checking if your device does 5 gigahertz or 2.4 gigahertz, and try and split them up if you've got a router that's capable of doing both those. I've got a mixture of Wi-Fi and home plugs around my house, but of course you could always. There's another solution, isn't there? You can distribute HDMI over Cat6. So if you really can't get your home, because home plugs won't always work if your mains aren't up to it. So you can. I think, have you done that, Steve? You've had
we've reviewed HDMI distribution. HDMI distribution systems. And obviously, if you want something that's going to be, very reliable, robust, and can handle just about anything, then that's a route to go. But there are serious caveats that have to be brought in here. Whereas if you buy some Power over Ethernet plugs, they cost buttons. Most of most of these distribution systems are quite expensive. The ones we've reviewed have been, in the sort of thousands of pounds area. And
because they're professional products, that's why.
Yeah, it's a professional product, and it's designed to work in a way, and they do work really well, I have to say, in terms of both in terms of using IR repeaters and sending the signal over long distances, that sort of thing. They're fantastic and they work really well, but they aren't cheap. And obviously, the big downside to this approach is rather than just plugging something into an existing wall socket and using your existing power circuit in your house, you're going to have to actually put cables in, which means drilling holes in walls and running cables through them and all this sort of stuff. It's very invasive in terms of putting it in, unless it's a new build or something, or you're doing some sort of renovation or something like that. But if you're an existing house and you've got to put it in, there's going to be some drilling and there's going to be some making holes and running cables and this sort of stuff, which maybe you don't want to do. And of course adds to the cost unless you're doing it yourself. So it's not necessarily the cheapest approach, but it can often be the best approach in terms of reliability and robustness and capabilities, and also for a degree of future-proofing as well.
So, Steve, you obviously live in the 14th century. How are you managing?
Actually, I've got my house isn't that big, so even though it's old and has thick walls, a bit like your place, Phil, it's relatively compact. So I just use my router reaches all the rooms. Actually, I've got a couple of actually, not just plug-in ones. So we've reviewed quite a few of these Power Ethernet devices, and most of them you just plug into an existing wall socket. And some of them have a socket as well, so you don't lose that socket, which is quite handy, because one of the big problems is if you've got limited wall sockets in your room, you don't want to necessarily lose one of them. Some of them have a socket on the front of them, so you plug it in and you can plug something else into that, which is good. what I've got was reviewing was ones that actually are like wall sockets. So you replace the whole wall socket. So you have still one plug on one side, and on the other side there are four, Ethernet ports, and those definitely are in terms of attractiveness. They look really good. Looks really professional when you put them in, and they're really easy to do. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. I did it, and just remember to turn off the mains before you start doing anything.
Isn't that illegal? That is a grey area, though. If it is a wall socket as well, isn't we should be in public at least be acknowledging that is something that really ought to be done by a certified electrician.
Yeah, it should be.
But
Yeah, personally, I'd always recommend getting an electrician in to do anything involving the mains. But if you do, I mean, the thing is, they aren't very expensive. I think about £100, but they do look really nice. Instead of having something plugged in. Although these devices are getting a lot more discreet over time, but having it actually built in as a wall socket looks quite nice, and obviously it's very, very handy.
I've got an audiophile main socket. I'm not making that up. It got sent for review, and because I actually went to the effort, because I wasn't going anywhere near my own mains, I had an electrician put it in, and I simply can't be asked to take it out again. So yeah, it's got.
What does that entail, Ed? Exactly?
It's just it's built like a tank, and then they've just made an absurd effort on all the contacts and everything's laid out. I make no claims at all for its efficacy, but it's too much of an effort to remove. So there it is. It lives in my lounge.
Well, a lot it's like these mains cleaners and so on. Yes, they work to a certain degree, but one thing that they don't do is improve your black levels, make your motion better, and add 50 kilowatts of power to your amplifier. You know what I mean? Thankfully, it's not as bad as back in the analog days where, there was a lot of snake oil, but there was some merit to some of the things that you could do with cabling and so on. I mean, nowadays, HDMI, it's nice to see that a lot of companies have stopped the old patter of it'll improve your picture quality and black levels and colour and all the rest of it, and just sell them as cables. And I've got to say, I recently bought a whole load of online shopping sites, own brand of cables, and absolutely fantastic and cost pennies.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I'll say these days is that if you're running a long HDMI cable run, a good quality cable can make a difference. And that's fair enough.
So much as it will work.
Yeah, but the difference is it'll either work or it won't work. There won't be any subtle improvements in picture quality, and I'm glad to see that certain magazines have also stopped reviewing them for that reason.
Right, let's move things on. What have we got coming up for review? And where are we in the month? Is it worth going to Ed at this point or not?
I've got one of them in and another one hopefully turning up this week. As I say, I'm listening to, having done my sport earphone review, which is now up for your delectation and consumption. I'm back in a slightly more comfort zone. As I say, I did explain this in the last podcast. It's a less expensive product from the people that made us the £1,000 earphones last year, the Nobles. So that's proving interesting. At the moment, and then the third of the fourth turntables is turning up presently. I'm not going to give too much away about that. We're taking the jump into four figures now, and then hopefully towards the end of the month. Well, I know all of my stuff is towards the end of the month, but in terms of logistically towards the end of the month, I hopefully will secure a Q Acoustics 3000 speaker package, because let's face it, everything else they've done so far has been annoyingly, brilliantly good. And certainly I don't know about Steve, but what I heard at Bristol suggests that they haven't exactly forgotten how to do it either. So I've very high hopes that that's going to be a bit of a stormer.
After our last conversation on these speakers, I did go and have a look at the website to have a look at the leather versions. The leather.
It's not bad actually, is it?
It looks alright, yeah.
I'm going to see if I can get them in that, because I'm kinky.
Mark, what are you working on at the minute?
First up will be the latest in my Android box saga, which will be the Minix X8H. And I've done the X8H Plus. So it's very confusing, their product range, I have to say. It's basically the only difference is it doesn't do 4K HEVC decoding. Otherwise, it's identical, which is excellent. I've sat looking at a Samsung J9000 48-inch. It's a curved TV. I've not had a great deal of chance to watch it. I watched a bit of Amazon 4K the other night, which was all right-ish. I've got a Samsung 4K scaling Blu-ray player plugged into that, J6500, I believe. And then just more Android boxes.
Interesting. Have you had much with the Blu-ray player? Because I'm interested to know if it still does a bit of the behind backdoor noise reduction stuff on there.
I'll be honest, I've done absolutely nothing with the Blu-ray player, but it's plugged in.
You've plugged it in, yeah.
I've plugged it in. That's as far as it's gone.
How much does that Blu-ray player cost, Mark?
Not a lot.
What specific?
Specifically?
Yeah, would be the answer to the question.
I don't know.
Roughly?
49.
Oh, I can see. Here you go, dear listener. This is how well prepared we really are. On
I obviously haven't actually loaded it into the product base yet. The product.
We're off the back of a 4-day weekend. What can I? I'm just not.
Yeah.
And also, I'm on a dust day as well. So.
Okay.
Oh no.
So yeah, it'll be interesting.
All right.
Actually, there's no price. There's no price available yet. I asked that. It's one of these really early products again. So
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because
Not
I've
in the
also got
shops.
a Blu-ray player in for review at the moment, and I was just curious as to how much you're.
It's considerably less than the one you've got.
Yeah. I've got. Before you ask me the question, Phil, do you want to ask me the question first?
No, why don't you shock our listeners?
Last week, Arkham delivered 2 products for review to me, which is great because we haven't seen any, apart from a couple of DACs that Ed's done, we haven't really seen any of the Arkham AV stuff for a bit of time now. So it was good to get something in. We got the AVR 750, which is their flagship 7-channel AV receiver. And I've got to say, compared to a lot of the competition, this is it's very much about sound quality and very little else. It's not really all bells and whistles like you'd find on many of the other, even cheaper budget stuff that you like the X3100 that you reviewed, Phil, with lots of features on it. This is very stripped down. I mean, the front panel's almost totally bare. There's none of the big input dials and volume control knobs and this sort of stuff. It's all very basic. There's hardly any inputs in fact on the front.
There's no way to check knob feel.
No, can't check the knob feel at all. It's just a couple of little buttons. Strangely, unusually, there's not even an HDMI input at the front. This sort of stuff. It's just as an.
Now you see, but that to me makes I just don't. I appreciate that there will be a group of people who are hot plugging something via HDMI in and out of a front socket on an AV receiver, but I don't believe that they're a majority. And it's just another thing to either have to cover up or hide behind a flap or some other. It's like I'm with Arkham.
Well, Denon just let it all show, Ed, and I've got to say it didn't bother me.
Depends on how much you're paying.
That's because Phil,
Yeah.
you don't have a toddler.
Yeah,
But the weird thing about the Arkham, Ed, is it's got that kind of strange. It's a design feature which looks like it should be a flap, but isn't. I assume it's an air intake or something. I'm not quite sure what
it looks like it's It looks like
a tiny flap along the bottom, like an edge, basically a lip.
Yeah.
And I was pushing at it, thinking, is it a flap? I mean, is there an HDMI behind here somewhere? So I'm shoving away, thinking, no, that was just a design feature.
And then you broke
So,
So last week Withers was outwitted by a cat. This week he's unable to determine if something is a hinged door or not.
he's been flapped.
Yeah, so there's no HDMI input on the front or any other than a headphone socket, which makes it. I mean, I actually say I can kind of see the logic behind it. If you're talking about high quality, AV receiver, do you need someone who can plug it? No, not necessarily. At the back, there's two HDMI outputs and 7 HDMI inputs, which should be enough for most people, so that's fine. 7 channels amplification, no Atmos, no DTSX, not that we know what that is yet, although that will be out on Thursday. So watch this space for that one, or no Aura or anything like that. So it's very much it's all about sound quality. It's all about doing music 2-channel.
I have a question.
Sorry,
I have a question.
Go on.
Does it have an auto EQ system?
Yeah, it does. Although it's very basic. Comes with a little auto EQ mic. When it runs through the system, it just does it from one position. It's not like you're doing multiple positions and this sort of stuff. So it's pretty basic. It got all the measurements totally wrong for where the speakers were relative to where the microphone was. I think it's in there basically as a sort of last resort. I mean, what they would rather you did was you set it up correctly, measure the distances, measure the levels with an SPL meter, position the speakers correctly, carefully position your subwoofer, idea. I mean, because what people tend to forget, I think, generally is EQ systems. They're not, it's not magic. It's not going to fix everything. It can improve certain things, but ultimately, the biggest impact on your sound system is going to be the room it's in. So the better the room and the better it's installed into the room initially, the more care you take in terms of speaker placement and thinking about where everything's going to be relative to listening position. Fiddling around you have to do afterwards. And I think that was their approach, which is fair enough.
The other flip of the coin there is that if you set it up correctly to start with, and then you go to EQ, you're giving the EQ less to do, it's got less calculations to do, it can be more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like anything, the more you get right at the beginning, the less you have to do at the end to get it perfect or sounding as good as possible. And their big selling point on this receiver, and it's not a cheap receiver, I'm going to say that up front, it's $3,500, $3,299, I think it is, currently available at. It's a lot of money for what is a 7-channel receiver with none of the new formats or anything like that. You're talking pure old school.
What's the grade amplification on there?
It's Class G. I'll try and do an explanation, a condensed explanation in the review, obviously. But the idea is to get the kind of performance you get from Class AB without all the heat that generates effectively. Because if you're trying to cram 7 channels into an AV receiver chassis, so that's part of it, and the idea is that it's got more power available when it needs it and more transparency. That's the ultimate goal of it. And I have to say, it does sound really good. Price aside, with 5.1, 7.1 channel content and with music, really good with music too. It sounded great. It sounds really good. Whether you think it sounds good enough to justify the cost, that's a personal preference and your own opinion. But certainly as an AV receiver, it's a really sweet sounding receiver. Very good.
Well, I've just been encouraging people to spend $3,000 on a sub, so
that's a good point.
I'll stay out of the value argument.
We really are the review team of the people here.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Champagne reviews all around here. Well, hang on, I've not finished yet. I don't. The $3,000 for the receiver, fair enough. But they also delivered their Universal Blu-ray player. I've got to say, actually, I'm going to take umbrage at this. Universal Blu-ray player, not exactly, because it doesn't play DVD audio. It's Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray, DVD, and SACD playback. Now, you could say DVD audio is not a great loss, but I kind of feel that you look at something like the Oppo, which is genuinely universal in that sense. It's £1,200 now. That's a lot of money for a Blu-ray player, especially since we all know that if you're talking about over HDMI, one Blu-ray player is going to look like another Blu-ray player.
Picture-wise.
Yes, picture-wise. So what you're paying for here is audio performance, and it's got balanced XLR outputs. But that's going to put it in competition with the Oppo BDP 105, which also has tank-like construction. This is really light compared to it's nowhere near as well constructed as the Oppo. That also has balanced XLR outputs. I would be struggling to recommend this at that price point over an Oppo BDP 105. And I think it's £899. Still a lot of money for a Blu-ray player, but it's 400 quid, 300 quid less than the Arcam. So that's a very expensive Blu-ray player. I was quite surprised when I saw the price on it.
So let's move on. No games news this week. Mark didn't make it through the Easter break unscathed.
He's alive, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's alive.
As far as I'm aware, he's alive.
Yeah. So we're going to pass over games news, but there is a games podcast coming up next week. So if you're waiting on your gaming fix, you will get that. So we're going to move on to movie news next, and the big Oscar hope for 2015. So it feels like a while since I've asked this question. Steve, what's at the cinema?
Well, this weekend, last Friday, in fact, it was Fast and Furious 7, or as it's called in the States, Furious 7, which is slightly confusing. They seem to have a habit of having different titles for different areas. So in the US, it was Fast 5, but in the UK, it was Fast and Furious 5. Then in the US, it was Fast and Furious 6, but in the UK, it was Furious 6. And now it's Fast and Furious 7 in the UK and Furious 7 in the States. But anyway, went to go and see that. And I've got to say, I mean, let's be honest right up the front here. No one's expecting, quality filmmaking. Well, certainly well-made film, possibly, but no one's expecting it to be, intelligent filmmaking. Everyone knows what to expect from a Fast and Furious movie now. It's going to be big and dumb and fun. Globetrotting, loads of ridiculous stunts, totally gravity-defying events. I mean, they drive a high-performance car between 3 buildings at one point, at about 50 stories up. You got Jason Statham on board as the villain, and a pretty good villain he is too. But the problem is they kind of seem to have combined a number of different plots into one film. It's like there's too much story even for one movie in this, because they've got the revenge aspects of Statham, who's the brother of the villain from the sixth film, and he's trying to get revenge on and Dominic Toretto's team. Whilst at the same time, there's also a MacGuffin where they're looking for this device called God's Eye, which is some hackers created, which can basically hack into every camera on the planet simultaneously and find someone within about 10 seconds. And they were going to use this MacGuffin to find Jason Statham's character before he, kills them, basically. Although he keeps popping up anyway, so I think just wait for the turn up would have been a better plan. But that's what's going on in it. But it's just that there was ludicrous amounts of action. It's thoroughly enjoyable, I felt. They did a really good job, I have to say, of dealing with Paul Walker's untimely death, because obviously they hadn't finished shooting the film when he died. They were about halfway through production. So they've rewritten it to a degree, and they used his brothers and other body doubles, stunt doubles, and then CG to finish his performance. And it's not noticeable. Certainly, I didn't sit there thinking that isn't Paul Walker. I mean, it seemed, you could see a few times when he thought, well, he has a microphone over his mouth, and that should presumably help with lip syncing and that sort of stuff, and where they'd use bits maybe from outtakes from other films and this sort of stuff to help finish things off. But it's pretty seamless and it works really well. And the ending, I have to say, the ending is a really sweet, sort of tribute to Paul Walker. And I'm man enough to admit it. There was a tear. I shed a tear at the end of the film. It's obviously it's been a gigantic hit. It's made 384 million in its opening weekend worldwide, which is I think seventh or eighth in the record books. It's really good. I mean, a massive opening. It made more on its opening day in the US than the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift made in its entire US run.
Yeah, but Steve, we're talking about a major holiday in the UK and the US. What else was it up against?
No, everyone was avoiding it. But it's going to be, it looks like it's on track to be the first Universal film to breach $1 billion in its initial run. And that's, impressive. I mean, like we've been saying for a long time, it's not very often that a franchise gets progressively more and more successful as it moves on, rather than the other way around.
I'm glad you said successful and not better.
Well, I'd also say I think there's no question that, if anyone can remember the original Fast and Furious movie, it was basically just a knockoff of Point Break with cars. Moderately successful. Too Fast, Too Furious was more of the same, but without Vin Diesel. The Tokyo Drift had none of the original characters in it and took place in Tokyo, as the name might suggest. Although the character from Tokyo Drift does appear in the seventh film, which is good. It ties everything together. But it was with Fast and was called the Fast and Furious, which was the fourth movie, rather confusingly, where they brought back all the original characters and rebooted it basically, and that sort of set it on its new direction. And then the big change came at Fast 5, where they brought in The Rock. And it became basically a heist movie, globe-trotting heist movie, action-packed. And that's when it suddenly just took off in terms of its appeal and popularity. And they've just basically been doing that, ramping up the action with each successive film. So in the sixth one, you had them chasing the world's biggest plane on the world's longest runway. In this one, you've got The Rock basically getting out of his hospital bed, where he's been put in hospital by Jason Statham, and then going to his daughter's day. He's got work to do and just flexes his muscles, and his plaster cast breaks off his arm, and then he's walking down the street carrying a minigun and firing at helicopters. It's awesome. It's just it's everything you could possibly want, really.
It's quite funny. There was I can't remember which online publication it was. It might have been Consequence of Sound. It might. I'll try and dig it out for the comments section of the podcast. They made one of their reporters who'd never seen any of them sit down and watch all of the first six back to back, and his live commentary was brilliant, because at first he sort of hated it, and by the end it's like, I just can't wait to watch the next one, and I don't actually know what's wrong with me.
Well, you see, I haven't seen any of these Fast and Furious films. Never sort of appealed to me. But I was on Amazon, and they're on there for 20-something quid for all six. On Blu-ray.
Get in there, Phil, and then marathon.
I'm happy to throw 20 quid away, so I might get them.
Trust me, you'll by the end of it you'll be maybe it's Stockholm syndrome, but by the end of it you'll just be loving it. And the sight of the idea of just one film containing The Rock, Jason Statham, and Kurt Russell is enough in itself to make it worth seeing, I think. It's just such good fun. I mean, they know it's ludicrous. No one has any
Not to mention there is Ludacris in it as well.
Oh yeah, and Chris Ludacris Bridges is also in it as a character. Yeah, everyone's got their tongue so firmly into their cheek it's coming out the other side of their cheek now. That's the point. But hell, it's fun and it's entertaining and it's ridiculous. And sometimes you just want to go to the movies and be entertained for a couple of hours, don't you? And that's what this does. It does it in spades. It does it really well. And it even manages to be genuinely quite moving at the end, the way they deal with the whole Paul Walker issue. I thought was quite sweet. And yeah, I thoroughly recommend. If you're a fan of the series, clearly you're going to go and see it. Anyone who's a fan of the franchise must go and see it because they'll really enjoy it. If you're just a fan of having a fun couple of hours at the movies, it does really help if you haven't seen it because they do have sort of a very convoluted a chronology going on here. It kind of helps if you do know what's going on a little bit. But the way they introduce Statham's character at the beginning is fantastic, I have to say. Really clever and very funny. Some of the stunt stuff is really impressive too. I mean, obviously a lot of it's CG, but some of it's very impressive.
Half of it is that, when the first one came out, and I think I'd been driving for 6 months, and now we're 7 in, and it's like I own a people carrier. I mean, it's in itself quite disappointing. But yeah, we're getting on for sort of Bond levels of just being an overarching part of your existence. Really, they've just been around for so long. It's peculiar.
Okay, the lone voice here that hasn't said a word yet, but has been listening. I know has been listening intently to this.
Shaking my head. Just
yeah.
The whole thing, really. The original, funnily enough, was on ITV2 last night, and I happened to walk into the room, and Jenny had left that channel on. I don't know what she was watching, and I sat down and I watched 15-20 minutes, and that was enough. It was awful, just dreadful.
The first one is pretty dreadful.
Yeah, well, that just puts me off.
That's the thing.
No, you can't talk me around.
Good.
You can't talk me around. I think it's gone too far now as well. There's too many to catch up with. I'll never watch 6 bloody movies before watching the latest one. If it's a convoluted story that takes some work to get back into, I've just got no chance. So no, it's a big no.
It's a no from me.
I'm out.
It's funny. The first, ironically, the first one, I think things actually go downhill for the second one, if that is possible. Tokyo Drift is a funny fish, because but for literally a blink and you'll miss it cameo from Vin Diesel at the end, which didn't he do to get the Riddick film back or something?
Yeah, something like that. There was something
he was all out, and then they pulled him back in again. But it blink, and then as I say, it's only then through the curious attack on time logic and interdimensional
the problem
space.
was because the Han character was really popular, and there was the one popular thing in Tokyo Drift was the character of Han. But a bit of a spoiler here, but he dies at the end of Tokyo Drift, and that meant that if they wanted to have him in this film.
Actually, I just changed. I decided I was going to watch it, but now you've just completely ruined it for me again.
So in order to have him in the
I'm going to throw
films,
20 quid away now.
They had to set all the other films they made after Tokyo Drift before Tokyo Drift to explain why he was still alive. And it's only now on the 7th film that it's now set after Tokyo Drift. So that's what I mean by convoluted chronology here. It's all a bit, the timeline is a bit over the shop. I thought they did quite cleverly tied everything in with Tokyo Drift at the end of the 6th film in a really funny, interesting, which is how they introduced Jason Statham's character. I think it worked really well. Even it doesn't make a lick of sense, but who cares? It's great. Go and see it. You know you want to. And The Rock. Actually, The Rock wasn't in it as much as I liked, I have to say. My one complaint was not enough Rock.
That's because you wanted him in all the time. If it was just 2 hours of oiled Rock, you'd have been...
Well, he's in at the beginning, and he has this massive punch up with Jason Statham, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, the two of them beating 7 bells out of each other, and then he's kind of hospitalized for most of the film. And then he comes back at the end with a minigun, and it's awesome. But there's also a great fight between Vin Diesel and Jason Statham with massive spanners and sledgehammers, which is up there with the fight at the end of Streets of Fire for a ludicrous, way of having a fight.
Did you get the link that I sent you with him lip syncing to Miley Cyrus?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Yes. Look, he's a very charismatic man. I think he's, I'm not saying he's a great actor. Obviously, he's not a great actor, but when he's doing what he does best, there's no one better than The Rock. And in this kind of film, he is great. He's got down slightly more charisma than Vin Diesel, who I've got to say is a really charisma-free zone, in my opinion.
Do you know what? I'm sending a link. I found a photo. There's a particular Reddit called Old School Cool. It's just got some historical photos, many of which are properly cool. This one isn't cool, but it's a photo of The Rock's dad. And it's like, bloody hell.
I'm just waiting on it loading. Give me a sec.
That is a hell of a moustache.
It is, isn't it?
That's old school. That's 70s porn, really.
Okay, you need to remember to post the link to this head on the podcast.
Are you sure that can't be the podcast cover? Is it probably not big enough, is it?
It's a wrong ratio. That's my excuse.
Fair enough.
Like a pumped up John Conte.
I wouldn't tell him that to his face. Stunned silence.
Well, anyway, other films that came out which have been covered by the review team this weekend were briefly, Steve.
While We're Young, which it was a comedy with Ben Stiller and Naomi Watts, where they're basically some middle-aged couple who end up becoming friends with a young hipster couple, played by Amanda Seyfried and Adam Driver. They kind of realise they're getting old, and they do all these various things to try and feel young again. It was certainly well received by our reviewer, Sharuna, and it looks like quite an interesting and funny movie, actually. And the other film coming out is The Water Diviner, which is directed by and stars Russell Crowe. Again, Cassandra reviewed that. She thought it was great. I think she gave it 8 out of 10. And it has had good reviews all around. It looks like quite an interesting film where a Australian father goes to Gallipoli in order to find his dead son's bodies, finds more than perhaps he thought he'd find. Don't try and give too much away there, really. But apparently it's very even-handed in its dealings with Islam and the Muslim Turks and everything. And it looks like a really good film, actually. I'm quite tempted to go and see that based upon Cassandra's review. Yeah,
there was Cassandra's review and also the comments under the review. I don't think there was any bad comments in there, which is like, all right, okay. Must be worth going to see. So this Friday, keeping the quality end of things up, what do we have coming to the cinema on Friday? Yeah.
If you want a weekend for some not so great movies, this is the weekend for it.
This is the weekend to tidy up the garden.
This is the weekend to not go to the cinema. Hot Tub Time Machine 2. Now, I've seen Hot Tub Time Machine. Has anybody else seen the original?
Yes, I have now. Do you know what? I don't hate it.
No, I quite enjoyed it. It's quite funny. I like John Cusack. I think he's a very charismatic guy. This does not star John Cusack. He's not in the sequel because it was so bad, even John Cusack said no. And it has had terrible, terrible reviews in the States, where apparently it's absolute cobblers. But that's the sequel. And by the way, in case you're wondering, yes, there's a hot tub and it's also a time machine. In case,
but only in contact with a Russian energy drink.
Well, you say that, Steve, but the. In Back to the Future, it was never a DeLorean. It was always a freezer, a fridge freezer.
The original
time machine was going to be a fridge freezer, and had to change it because they thought they were going to have loads of deaths on their hands with kids climbing into the freezer trying to go back in time.
Also, they realised that a freezer wasn't particularly mobile.
Yeah, exactly.
Tricky. Anyway, so you've got Hot Tub Time Machine 2 coming out if you fancy going to see that, and also even worse, Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
I've never even heard of Paul Blart Mall Cop 1.
I have. It's I've heard of the original film. I have not seen the original film. I have to stress. It was moderately successful. It's got that. Hang on, what's this guy's name? It's really annoying bugger.
There's the chap from
Kevin something, isn't it?
Yeah, and they were in. Oh God, I kind of blanked it from my mind.
Kevin something from Oh God.
It was. Oh Christ! I had that really annoying. Also,
yeah, it's Kevin James. That's right. Yeah, it stars Kevin James,
the King of Queens. That's the puppy.
Kevin James from the King of Queens. And yeah, it looked awful the first time round. I'm guessing it hasn't got better second time round. Although maybe, unless it's pulling Fast and Furious and gradually getting better with each sequel. But I suspect not. Again, it's had terrible reviews. So 2 stinkers coming out this weekend. Luckily, not all is lost this weekend. There's also Good Kill, which is directed by Andrew Niccol and stars Ethan Hawke, where he plays a drone pilot, which actually does look interesting. And if I get to go to the cinema this weekend, that's the one I'm going to go and see.
And what are we covering on this site this week then? Are we sending reviewers out to Hot Tub it and Blart it?
I think we decided to take pity on them.
I think there are presumably working practice regulations that we have to abide to.
Cruel and unusual punishment, to be honest. I think we definitely would fall foul of some EU regulations if we sent anyone to go and see those two films. We will review Good Kill, which I think people would be interested in seeing. The other two, well, on your head be it if you go and see those two.
Okay, we got some Blu-ray reviews going up, and for the first time ever, I've actually seen one of them before the review goes up.
What have you seen? Interstellar?
Interstellar. It blew my mind, literally.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it up until the point of major spoiler. I'm not going to go into it in the podcast, but 3/4 of the way through, thought it was doing all right, and then it just kind of went a bit silly for me.
Did you watch it the weekend?
Yes.
Yeah. How did you find the aspect ratio changes?
I put up with it.
Yeah.
I set it for 235, and I just put up with it. It didn't do it too often, to be honest, so I just put up with it.
I haven't actually got around to watching I had a look. I looked at a bit of the disc at the weekend, and in terms of picture quality and sound quality, it is really
absolutely stunning.
Absolutely stunning, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some really good there's some excellent stuff about the making of the film. Although annoyingly, they haven't included a play all feature, so you have to sort of go through each featurette individually, which takes bloody ages. But it does go into some detail on how they shot it, how they did things like the CG, how they actually used the full-sized, not models, the actual full-size sets. They built some of the spaceships in full size and then shot them for the effect sequences. So it's not even models or CG; it's full-size thing, and then adding in the space sequences. And also they were using projectors and digital projectors to project stuff footage outside the window. So that's all being shot in camera. It looks and sounds amazing. It's got, although it's got a really annoying score. That bloody church organ gets so annoying after 2.5 hours of it. It's got some interesting ideas. It takes too long to get into space. A lot of it doesn't make any sense.
I didn't think it took that long. I'd heard that. It took a little while to get going, so maybe I was just pre-warned, and that's why I just let it drift over me and got into the movie. For me, 3/4 of the way through, they maybe should have ended it there. I think they went for the Hollywood ending, if you know what I mean, and it just did not pay off. With the tone of the rest of the movie, it didn't pay off.
They also made at one point, these highly trained intelligent astronauts make some really dumb decisions. It's like there's a whole point where one of the planets is near a black hole, so because of gravity dilation, every hour on this planet is equivalent to 7 hours on Earth. So I'm thinking, don't go to that planet then, because this is a race against time to save Earth. Spending every hour you spend on this planet is 7 hours on Earth. I think maybe find another planet to go and look at.
Was it not years?
3 alternatives. Yeah, every hour was 7 years on Earth, and there's 2 other planets they could go and investigate. I'm thinking, go and check out the other 2 planets.
I do love that meme that's doing the rounds with McConaughey and Hathaway's character. It's like, and they're saying, every hour here is 7 years on Earth. It's like, good, we'll wait for the new Tool album here.
There's a very, very funny, honest trailer on Screen Junkies. Don't watch it till you've seen the film, but once you've seen the film, watch it. They absolutely nail all the problems with the film, in a very humorous way.
Yeah, I think once they I don't want to give away any spoilers on this, but I think once they landed on a certain planet with Matt Damon, it should have ended at that point. I think they went for a big payoff and it didn't work.
Well, I mean, they had to in a sense, didn't they, Phil? Because it obviously ties in with the beginning. There are reasons why that. But yeah, I mean, what they were trying to cram. What it was actually 2 different screenplays molded. Well, so there was an initial screenplay by Jonathan Nolan, which was more interested in the whole idea of the Dust Bowl, which is obviously true from the 30s. He's taken that, what really happened in the 30s, and kind of extrapolated it into a sort of science fiction genre of, a blight on crops and Dust Bowl, etc., and the world almost, dying out effectively. And his brother came along with the idea of, okay, so the planet's dying, let's get off the planet and find somewhere else to live. And then bringing all these theories in from Kit Thorne about, wormholes and black holes, etc. And that's all great, but they're trying to cram so much into one film and trying to have their cake and eat it at every opportunity that you end up with cake all over your face. And I think by the end of that film, Nolan had cake all over his face.
Can we stop talking about cake?
I had a lovely piece of coffee cake before the podcast started.
Yeah, but you see, I just think, Steve, that the whole way that the whole tone of the film was pretty depressive up until that point. And I think it just suddenly went for the Hollywood ending, which didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I was swearing at it, to be honest. And there's not very
just an angry man.
Yeah, it's not very often that
other...
I shout at my projection screen, but I was at that. I was thinking, oh, f*** off.
Did you hurl food at it?
No, food's too valuable, Ed.
Fair play.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Interstellar, which is out. It came out last week. Kaz is doing the review, but I think his disc was late coming in, which is why he hasn't finished it yet. But and obviously Easter's got in the way, but he's doing that.
Yeah,
it's a good disc. I mean, I could certainly say from my own experiences, and I'm sure yours too, it's a great looking and sounding disc, and it's got some very interesting extras on it. So if you are either a fan of the film or interested, it's worth getting.
Some of the most realistic sound effects, I think, of a rocket taking off and then hitting the atmosphere, getting through the atmosphere and hitting space. And the sound mix is just fantastic. And if you've got a dynamic system, just the way that it dynamically changes so quickly as well. I thought that was really well done. I actually thought there was things in my room about to fall off the shelves and so on. But it was just the way the sound mix was
although
done.
That's one of the big problems with the film, is that they have this big rocket launch, like deliberately done to evoke memories of Apollo and this sort of stuff. And but if they had to do that to get off the ground on Earth, what they're doing with that little spaceship later, totally impossible on a planet. It's like they can't, again, trying to have their cake and eat it. They should have either had spaceships that could take off from planets really easily, or they had to find another way of getting back off the planet. But they try and do both. The film's unfortunately riddled with ludicrous. And
the majority of the time, once you've given a movie an hour and a bit to work itself on you, you're prepared to go with some stuff. But I ended up shouting at the screen.
Yeah, I just get annoyed when a film sets itself up. We're scientifically accurate. Okay, a bit like Gravity and also Sunshine. Both of those other films as well made a big point of how scientifically accurate they were. Well, if you're going to say that, you better damn well be scientifically accurate. And the fact is that these films rarely actually are. They obviously always eventually narrative and trumps science every time. If it works for the story, sod the scientific accuracy, and that's what generally happens. If you look at Gravity, yes, they did some things very accurately in terms of the way people behave, and stuff like the lack of gravity, the lack of gravity and the lack of sound in space. That was done really well. But when she takes the spacesuit off in about 5 seconds with nothing underneath it, no cooling suit, nothing, you're thinking like, clearly. Reality went straight out the window there.
Yeah, but you don't want to sit for 25 minutes while they take off.
Someone takes a space. No, that's what I mean. But narratively, it didn't make sense to spend half an hour for taking off a spacesuit.
Yeah. Okay. So other Blu-rays that are coming out, I think we better move away from Interstellar. Otherwise, we're going to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. And it is an experience that you have to sit through. Whether you enjoy it or not is another thing. Predestination, are we there yet?
Yeah. If you haven't seen Predestination, and it is a great film, I recommend it highly. Do not buy the UK release. It is reformatted in 1.78 to 1 instead of 2.4 to 1, which was what it was actually theatrically presented at. And it has none of the extras that are on the Sony release, which is available. You can buy for £2 more from Amazon. It's the Nordic release, basically, which is also done by Sony. So for the extra £2, go and buy the Region B.
But the Nordic one, it'll just be raining all the time, and it'll be grey scenes and bridges.
It's exactly the same as the US disc. It's got all the same extras. It's got the same soundtracks and everything English, and it's got this correct aspect ratio. But don't touch the UK release with a barge pole, because and this is a bit of a worrying trend. I've seen it a few times now, where particularly films being reformatted to 1.78 to 1 when they were shot. Well, they weren't shot anamorphically, but they've been shot framed for a scope ratio in camera, using digital cameras, and they've been opened up. The mat's been opened up at the top and bottom, which is a worrying trend that I thought we'd moved away from over the last few years. So vote with your wallets and do buy that version. And the other film coming out this week is not a new film, it's Desperado, but it's a steelbook release. I think it's a Zavvi exclusive, and it's never been available on Blu-ray before in this country. So if you're a steelbook fan or a Desperado fan, it's worth searching out for.
Okay, and is there any fantastic Blu-rays that I can look forward to next week?
Yeah, well, there's two out next week. One's Black Sea, which is a thriller set on a submarine with what's his name? Jude Law.
Yeah.
With Jude Law. And Kevin MacDonald's directing it. He made things like The Last King of Scotland and some other interesting movies. It looked quite good. It looked interesting in the trailers. Have not seen it myself. But it looked interesting in trailers, and Kaz is reviewing that, and I'm reviewing Night at the Museum 3, which I think one of Robin Williams' last movies. Obviously, if you've seen Night at the Museum or Night at the Museum 2, you'll know what to... I think this one's set in a museum in England, though, so it's got a bit of an English slant to it. But that's coming out next week. That'll also be a competition prize as well.
Okay, so that's the cinema and Blu-rays all wrapped up for this week and next. And got to say, I'm buying more Blu-rays than I have in a long time, Steve. Don't know why, just suddenly got back in the habit of buying them again. And interesting soundtracks. I watched this will tell you how far back I am. The most recent movie I watched, apart from Interstellar, was Edge of Tomorrow. Again, another fantastic soundtrack. Really good when you got several different sets of speakers to try it on as well. It's been interesting that way, and yeah, really good. Okay, so we had a question from Amard1981. He asks, do you still consider yourself movie fans, or are you disillusioned with modern movies? Or, to put it another way, what was the last film that you saw that you loved and would watch again? I'll answer this one. I'm not disillusioned. I just think there's not a lot of originality around at the minute. Not a lot of stuff that's actually making me want to go to the cinema. And then when you get what should be an epic film like Interstellar and you end up shouting at it 3/4 of the way through, that's where the disillusion comes in for me, I think. On the other flip side, last film that I saw that I have watched a number of times since I originally saw it was Skyfall. I don't think there's been anything else where I've actually gone out of my way to watch it again a couple of times. The last one would be Skyfall. Hodge?
Disillusioned slightly, I guess. Too many superheroes, too many sequels. Like you say, too much derivative stuff. I mean, I get more excited about the kids getting excited for the movies these days. So we go, that's mainly what I'll go to the cinema for now. In fact, almost exclusively what I'll go to the cinema. In terms of my own life, watching movies at home, time is such when you've got two young kids that I end up picking something generally on running time first rather than how good it is. So if I'll have an hour and a half to myself at the end of the night if I'm lucky. So I'll try and squeeze a movie in now and again like that.
Paul Blart or Cop 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last movie I really, really enjoyed was probably Grand Budapest Hotel. I absolutely love that. Whether I'd watch it again in a hurry, I don't know. I'm not really one for doing that so much anymore. I think when I was younger, I think I watched Airplane about 20 times. I probably knew that word for word as a kid. But yeah, slightly disillusioned. There is still good stuff. Like that Edge of Tomorrow was really good. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Gravity for what it was. I don't watch them with anything like the regularity I used to. I used to be a frequent cinema visitor, but yeah, I'm just getting old, I guess. Old and a lack of time and too many sequels and too much Fast and Furious and nonsense.
Boo, boo.
You tell him. Ed?
I think with the proviso, I've never been... film has always, for as long as I can remember, been secondary to music for me. So I don't perhaps get as annoyed about a lack of originality, and neither do I revisit things with quite the same enthusiasm that I guess some other people do. I don't know. It's a funny one. I too haven't watched that many really recent release. I mean, the problem is when I do buy a recent release, it's because I'm buying something which is quite loud, or well mixed, or at least has some sort of worth for review purposes. It's rare that I buy something because I genuinely think, oh gosh, I want to sit down and watch that. I mean, an interesting instance of actually managing to sort of kill two birds with one stone. I thought that Fury was one of the first films I watched in a while where, although I sensed what the ending was likely to be, the process by which it got there was a little bit different. I thought that was quite a tidy piece of filmmaking. But no, I think the thing is that for as long as there's a lot of really interesting and varied stuff being released for me to listen to, I'm far less concerned by if the film industry is having a dry spell. So I guess I sort of I in many ways disqualify myself from this in so much as the levels of passion I've been able to actually source have always been at just that little bit lower, I guess.
Do I still consider myself a movie fan? Absolutely. My disillusion with modern movies to a degree. I think more often than not, I'm disappointed with a lot of films I get excited about, and then when I get to see them at cinema, Interstellar being a good example, a film that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and then when I actually saw it, was bitterly disappointed by the end, and that unfortunately happens more often than not. Which is why it's such a joy that on Friday, watching Fast and Furious 7, I wasn't disappointed in any way, shape, or form, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So great. In terms of recent films that I've seen, I'm not unlike Mark. I'm not too concerned by the slew of superhero movies. A lot of the stuff I saw last year that I really enjoyed was super. I mean, I thought Captain America: Winter Soldier was excellent. I really thoroughly enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. And you see some of the smaller budget movies that are quite. I mean, we've been talking about earlier, Predestination. The film itself is a really interesting movie. I really, really enjoyed it. A great time travel thriller. So there's good stuff around, but the big budget stuff, because they have to play it so safe, because they try to hit the largest demographic possible, because there's so much product placement and financing from all over the world, and trying to pander the Pacific market. So you get pandering to the Chinese market, or pandering to the Indian market, or whatever it is where they think they're going to make money. That diminishes their value, which is why I found myself more and more being drawn towards television, because on TV, at least, there's still a degree of freedom and creativity that we're not finding in the movies so much, particularly when the budgets are large. And as Mark pointed out, you're getting a lot of sequels and reboots and prequels and remakes, because it seems as though no one's got any imagination left anymore. And that is a bit of a concern. There haven't been that. I mean, I'm trying to think of the last really big budget, totally original. I think maybe Inception. So I'm trying to think what we've had recently, or maybe Interstellar, I suppose, in terms of big budget movies that were original and took some risks. And it's going to take a director of the clout of Christopher Nolan to be able to do that these days. I think most directors now probably find the studios will be on their backs the whole time. And what about this and what about that? And can we hit enough of the Chinese market? And what about the 14-year-olds? And is this demographic going to be covered? And we need a PG-13 rating, et cetera, et cetera. So it is diminishing the creativity in the film industry, unfortunately. But having said that, this year we've got some great stuff coming out. I'm looking forward to Mad Max Fury Road, which is out in May. I'm looking forward to Avengers: Age of Ultron, which is out at the end of this month. I'm looking forward to Jurassic World in the summer. I'm looking forward to what else have we got out?
I liked some of their Easter egg promo stuff over this weekend. Have you seen
Jurassic World?
Yes,
I have not seen them. No.
They just sort of cropped up as promo things on Twitter and so on and so forth. I thought that was, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's going to have any bearing on the film whatsoever, but I thought it was just a clever tie-in and an opportunity thing. If nothing else, whilst originality in films appears to be on its uppers, originality in marketing them is doing quite well. So yeah. Actually, some good telly on the moment. I know that Mr. Hodgkinson has moved considerably on from this by using other means of watching television, but Person of Interest has finally lurched into season 3 on Channel 5. I'm probably the only person that didn't get so frustrated at waiting that they found other means to watch it, but I had other things to be getting on with. I love MasterChef. I make no bones about it. I find it thoroughly entertaining and relaxing viewing. I
enjoy watching Thunderbirds Are Go on Saturday on ITV.
No, you see, I watched
surprisingly good.
It tried to get too much done in the first episode.
Yeah,
but no, and I'm afraid it doesn't also that in not changing the Thunderbirds, this means that Thunderbird 1 still looks like a toilet roll holder, and I don't care what anyone says. It's just not a good looking thing. Thunderbird 2's the bollocks, but Thunderbird 1 looks shit.
Yeah, and it's been updated in quite cleverly, actually, but retaining all the joy and fun of the original series. So I was quite pleased to see that. I'm really looking forward to Friday, Netflix. You get the whole of Daredevil, the new Marvel/Netflix series. Part of Marvel's, having already changed the game as far as movies go with that whole series of movies leading up to the Avengers, etc. They're now going to do exactly the same thing with TV. They're taking their minor characters like Daredevil and some of the characters you may not have ever heard of even, and they're going to do small, still within the same universe, but small, grittier, more adult-orientated shows. And I think they've got 5 different series lined up, and they're leading into another series called The Defenders. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out, and that's on Friday, if anyone's interested.
And it's the last episode of Fortitude on Sky Atlantic this week as well. It concludes this week.
Have you been watching? Did you watch any of those?
No, I haven't watched. I've been waiting so I can block watch them all in one go.
Very peculiar. I have a sneaking suspicion it has at least 2 writers who hate each other, and they've oscillated wildly between what they want it to be. And one of them has sort of won out towards the end, either by hitting the other one over the head with a script or something. But it's gone all over the place. But I'm eternally grateful for it, simply because it's introduced me to one of the actresses in it, Mia Jackson, who just is just wonderful, just a wonderful, wonderful person in every way.
It's the last episode of Better Call Saul today. If you haven't, this is on the Tuesday that we're recording this podcast. So if you haven't seen that series yet, it's really good. Been getting better each week, hasn't it, Mark?
Yeah. It's turned out a lot better than I thought it would. I was kind of worried for it being, the spin-off of Breaking Bad that it was, and that he wasn't going to be enough to carry it, but he's been more than enough. And along with Mike, it's been a joy, really. It's just getting better and better.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, next Monday, first episode of season 5 of Game of Thrones, which, based upon the trailer at least, looks like it's going to be awesome. And
if it's classic movies that you're looking for this week, I've just been having a look at the listings. Absolute classic. Showing on in Channel 4 HD, 6:40 on Saturday, Independence Day.
Oh, splendid. Although, if you don't own that on a disc, what's wrong with you? Come on. Welcome to Earth.
And proof that...
That's what I call a close encounter.
And proof that Steve Jobs was an alien, because all alien technology runs on iOS.
Or OS X.
Or OS X.
Wasn't that a particularly terrible MacBook, that generation as well? I don't know. It's a little before my time.
Anyway, I think we're wildly off subject now, and I think we've outstayed our welcome.
Well,
I think that usually happens in 5 minutes in, doesn't it?
So my thanks to Mark Hodgkinson.
When I win here, I'll buy you a lifetime supply of antidepressants.
Ed Selley.
God isn't my worry.
And Steve Withers.
I thought cockfights were illegal in Rio.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. And why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.